ladies and gentlemen, thank you for staying on. This is the third session for the day, and this is a session which I think is sort of perhaps in some sense leads very well from the earlier session where we were talking about skills, but this is also a session about startups, about entrepreneurship, and more importantly about how do you connect campuses, to creating more entrepreneurs. And we have with us, I think, the panel has people who are both ideators and people who have executed things very well. And I'll start with Hemang first. Hemang is currently Secretary, Capacity Building Commission, but in his previous role has been also the founding member of the Atal Innovation Mission, which within the Niti Aayog, housed within the Niti Aayog, has actually helped spur the whole growth of startup and entrepreneurship culture amongst institutions, both higher education and schools. Thank you, Hemang, for joining us today with us. We have Richa Bajpai, who's the founder of Campus Fund. And, it's a perfect name of her venture, because it's something that helps people start fund ventures which have started off from campuses. And we are at ISB, one of the early partners of her initiative. Richa, thank you very much for joining us today. We have Rajesh Sani, who's in some sense, again, as an ace investor, created numerous amount of success stories. It's sort of difficult to list out those ventures that you've invested in, Rajesh. But now in his new role is actually saying, how do you bring that knowledge into a campus and sort of help create the same culture through the campus? Weaving all of that together is the Lord himself, Bhagwan Chaudhary, who is a professor of finance at Indian School of Business, is executive director of the Digital Identity Research Initiative at ISB, and also in his new avatar is the faculty director of the iVenture at ISB, which is an initiative, an umbrella initiative that Bhagwan has sort of created a few months ago to bring together various entrepreneurship and startup initiatives within the school, including our two incubators at both our campuses. With those words, Bhagwan, over to you.
Thank you, Guru. Welcome to all my panelists and welcome to all the audience members. This session is important to me because, as Guru mentioned, I have decided to take ISB to the next level as far as entrepreneurship is concerned, and I have a lot to learn. And I'm delighted that I have three really, truly eminent panelists here who are going to tell me how to make this work. And as some of you may have seen me do panels before, I tend to ask our panelists rather personal questions because I think that is what is more interesting, because whatever they have written in public, you can read it very fast. You don't need to spend a whole hour listening to them. So let me start with Hemang. I have to tell you guys that Hemang has exquisite choice of food in Delhi. So if you are visiting Delhi, look him up and he'll tell you where to go. I had the pleasure of having dinner with him where he ordered the most exquisite food and wine for me. So thank you, Hemang. Hemang, now you started by working at consulting firms. You had experience there. And then you went to the World Bank. Then you came to the government as the officer on special duty. And now you're continuing your work as the secretary for capacity building. This seems rather curious. Why would you go from private sector where all the action is and move to the government? Especially when it comes to entrepreneurship, our biases are that government shouldn't do anything as far as entrepreneurship is concerned. They should stay out and let the private sector manage it. So give us some thoughts about why you are where you are today.
Well, thank you, Bhagwan. And when you have a company like Professor Bhagwan, you have to find a place where there is exquisite food and also there is a lot of space to sit there, because you end up talking to him for 3 hours and finishing whatever food comes on table. And I think today also we are going to have a similar experience where Bhagwan will serve us a lot of food for thought. Coming to my journey, I think my journey is, I feel my journey is very unique. I have been doing inside and outside with government. But why I started working with government? Because my first job was with government. you know about my consulting career, but even before joining consulting, I started my journey on an Asian Development Bank funded project in the earthquake region of Gujarat. And that gave me a fascinating experience working with government for first 2 years of my journey. And then I realized that as entrepreneurs, of course, we solve a lot of problems which concern society. But as government, you can think much, much beyond. You can think about public good, and you can think about creating future for generations to come. And that is what something fascinates me. And that is why I always go back for a few years to gather some more experience from outside and come and apply it within the government framework. Atal Innovation Mission and now the Capacity Building Commission is one such experience for me.
So the word capacity is very important. I think this is what distinguishes the government from the private sector. So from a private sector, I can do something, but the government can do it at a scale
Correct.
that no private company can dream of. But the government can also mess it up at a scale that no private company can dream of. So how do you walk that tightrope to make sure it works?
No, it's a very relevant question. And if I come to today's panel discussion topic, our topic is connecting campuses to entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
So we are already talking about a focus from supply side to demand side when it comes to campuses. We are already talking about, earlier we thought about bringing entrepreneurs to campus. And now we are talking about bringing campuses to entrepreneurs. Similarly, we have to bring government also to private sector rather than only bringing private sector to government. And when that experience starts merging, for example, in my particular journey, my experience at the World Bank gave me global scale. And now when I am back in India, I am able to bring in lessons from many other countries, what I have seen in last 5 years. Similarly, when we invite people like you and Richa and Rajesh to talk about their experiences in making policies at say, Entrepreneurial Innovation Mission or various other initiatives, that provides tremendous merging and synergy. So I think that is the key. How do we blur the lines? And now, as we go forward and we discuss the national new education policy in greater detail, we will see that those blurring the lines and merging the experiences from across the sectors, that is the key to success, and that is the key to future as well.
Okay, so I'll come back to you, Hemant, for more. But let me go and talk to Rajesh Sawhney now. Now, Rajesh, you also were an investor yourself. You are also an innovator, and you have an experience both as an investor and as an entrepreneur. But now you are heading the Center for Entrepreneurship at Plaksha University, which is new. What brought you back to academics and campus? Tell us a little bit about it, your personal motivation, but also where you see the opportunity is.
Hey, thanks, Bhagwan, for inviting me. It's been an honor. I finally get to meet you.
Yes, we have been talking about, yes.
Yeah, so I've been in the startup world, the tech startup world for the last 20 years, right? My journey started within a corporate, the Times of India Group, where I set up the whole Times Internet as the founding director there in early 2000 and saw the .com boom and bust. And then through my corporate career, then I one day decided in early 2011 that it's enough. The world is going to belong to entrepreneurs, not to the corporates. And I switched sides and decided to back young entrepreneurs.
Tell me a little bit of insight. Was that easy or not? I mean, this is,
it was very tough.
I know that many of my ISB colleagues, ISB alumni, are precisely in that situation. They've been at the corporate world 10 or 12 years and they're thinking, should I quit this and all go?
I can write a whole book on that.
Yes, so give us a glimpse of how difficult or how easy it was?
No, it is, to be honest, it could be very challenging because you get used to certain way of working, certain perks, certain incentives, the whole paradigm of, especially when you are in senior positions in corporations, a lot of resources available to you. You think about the projects in a very, very different way. So like I had this idea that if this business cannot become, 10,000 crore business in the next 5 years, not worth my time. And this is exactly not the way the startups think or start. So you need to totally unlearn everything that you learned about life, work style, and rethink business. So it can be challenging, and I took my time. But on the way, I learned a lot from the 100+ startups that I invested in. My own capital and others' capital, and made a lot of mistakes. And sort of one of the realization that I had over last 10 years is that the entrepreneurship is becoming more democratic, especially tech entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it's becoming younger in some ways, but it's also becoming age agnostic in some other ways, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So unprecedented historic opportunities are becoming available to this generation. When I first did this Times Internet thing, I had to write my own servers, right? I had to go to VSNL to install those servers. Today, all of that given free to all the startups in the world, thanks to AWS. With a switch of a button, you have infinite compute and hosting capacity.
That's right.
It's all in the cloud. And then we didn't have any money, right? Even in the companies, we had to scrounge for some dollars to start some website. But today, you have an idea, you have people willing to back you. So the friction from the entrepreneurship is taken. So it's all about now innovation, ideation, and execution, right? So it doesn't matter whether you're born into Ambani families or Tata families to start a new project. You can be sitting in the dorm of ISB and dreaming your next big thing, and it's possible to do it.
That's a very important insight that you can start from nowhere.
Totally.
You use the word dorm room, and I think Richa will talk about it a little bit more. But let me ask you this question. When you were in the corporate world and then you came to the entrepreneurial world, are you sleeping better now, or were you sleeping better when you were in the corporation?
Oh, much better now. No doubt.
Much better now.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so that's a surprise to me, because the impression I have is that entrepreneurs do not sleep. They work 24/7.
That's crap.
That's crap. Okay.
Yeah. So I don't think so. Look, there are different kind of entrepreneurs, like different kind of managers, and so there is no one formula of only paranoid work or only non.
There's no one
work.
formula. Very important.
I think it's these are different myths that get created. But I do see 2-3 trends, and I saw one trend that the most disruptive ideas tend to come from younger people. The older people bring their execution knowledge.
Okay.
And then therefore can sort of execute a thesis better, but totally disruptive ideas. Like for example, you have this whole notion of 10-minute, or the Canva, for example, you think of.
10-minute grocery, were you talking about?
Yeah. 10-minute grocery also has come from Stanford Dom, or Canva, which was like trying to disrupt Photoshop, came from Campus Dom. So these are the guys who can just
think of crazy ideas.
They can try anything, right? There's no mental block there. So that's one which I funded, much against the convention. I funded 2 young guys twice while they were in campus. One company I funded, Hacker Earth, and the guys were still in the dorms in IIT Roorkee, and they become very big. Now they have on their platform 10 million developers, and you'll hear a lot about them. And the other company, GamesOp, which they were not IITians, and they were actually at SRCC when I funded them. And they both have actually done very well. And I failed also taking bets on some of these startups, like I failed in many other startups. But that told me that these guys can be very disruptive. And then I have another learning after coming to, I'm not full-time into Plaksha because I continue to do my accelerator and
Yes. Yeah.
investing.
Yeah.
And I realized that while student entrepreneurship is easier, faculty entrepreneurship is 100 times more challenging in India.
Why is that?
That's what we really lack, I think. And we
Well,
had
why
this
is that? Why
vision.
is that? It's just
Yeah,
because
sure.
we faculty are very difficult people. We have our
No.
own.
I think it's about ecosystem. Look, both my kids study in two different universities in US. I have gone and have a lot of interactions with a lot of good universities. So look, so I think we are at a stage where our faculty has not seen successes of their work in commercial work,
Yeah.
right? They've not tasted the fruits of their research getting converted into products and services that people consume. I think that needs to happen. And that makes people entrepreneurial when they see impact of their work. But I think we are around there. We are around there. I think as much as we need to, so look, the whole idea with which Plaksha was born, and I think it needs to be taken to this idea that historically we thought of colleges as factories to produce labor or engineers for L&T or Reliance or Tata's or TCS, or ISB to produce great MBAs for investment bankers or venture firms. But this idea now needs to be turned on its head, and where colleges should become cradles of entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
So why should we think that all our students will go into job? In fact, the day I joined, I said, I am going to fight the job placement cell. My goal is to eliminate job placement cell in Plaksha. People were sort of not able to understand what I'm trying to say.
I see.
So it's that paradigm which is very, very much possible today, right? Why cannot 30, 40, 50% of your students think of starting when they quit, they finish their education, or even during the education? And I think there are many, many examples. Money is frictionless. It's a lot more facilities of mentoring, capital, resources available. And at very early stages, you're not married, you don't have kids, your cost of maintenance is low, you should take more risk actually. And smarter people understand that, right? It's much more harder to do a startup when you're in 30s, you have a kid, you have wife, you have EMI running. When you have none of this, right? And India, we are actually blessed because most of our students don't have student loans, right? Their parents have funded them, or government has funded them in the case of IITs and IIMs, right? So that's a huge incentive to be thinking entrepreneurially. So I think these are my initial remarks.
Okay, I'll come back to you. You said lots of things, quite provocative things, and I'd like to come back to those things. The two things that you said, and one of them was, you said the most disruptive ideas come from young people. Let me start with that. So let me go to Richa. And Richa, your fund is actually called Campus Fund, isn't it?
Yes.
And you use the word dorm room. In fact, the very idea. And you have an MBA from London School of Business. Although you did come to ISB, I was told, but you didn't stay with us for very long. I think everything you had to learn, you learned it in the first 3 terms and you said, I'm done. Now I'm on to something else. So tell us how you ended up being where you are today. Tell us about your journey a little bit.
Sure. And first and foremost, I'd like to say I'm just so delighted to be here because I think you guys are making the pitch for Campus Fund, to be very honest, because that's something that we can't do alone. It has to be the entire nation coming together to create a generation of student entrepreneurs. So I'm very grateful that we are doing this session today. Really delighted.
Being grateful is not enough. Just remember to send us a 0.25% equity each, okay?
Done deal, Professor. Yeah, so actually, I'll just give you a little bit of background. I've been a student entrepreneur myself. I haven't worked in any other company outside of my own startup. So I did my first startup back in 2009 when I was in my final year of engineering. And that was in the renewable energy space. It was still early days for the VC industry in India. So we ran that business for a couple of years, but then we pivoted and built a technology firm, which is basically a platform which helps large enterprises measure and manage the impact of their CSR, sustainability, and volunteering initiatives. So we raised about $20 million in that journey and started off in India and expanded to the US and Europe. But then I soon realized, that I need to be doing something more and explore more. So I moved out of my startup. To be very honest, it's very difficult to move out of your own startup. So one of the most valuable lessons that I learned is learning to let go and let,
Learning to let go.
Yes,
Okay.
very important. It becomes difficult for entrepreneurs, right? Because you are used to doing everything in your journey, right? From being, a peon to a CEO, you do everything, right? So in the initial days.
And Richa, when you get older, you're going to realize that this idea of learning to let go is actually much deeper, right? I'm a Buddhist, so I can tell you that there are much deeper connotations of this.
I agree. And just to that point, I've also started practicing Buddhism when I actually quit my startup. So that was the trigger. Then what best to do while taking a break is to go back to school. So then I joined the London Business School in 2019. In fact, I graduated in July 2021. But while there, I was exploring.
So I want to stop you. That sounds completely counterintuitive. Why would an entrepreneur want to go and do an MBA? Our MBA programs currently are training people to go to McKinsey's of the world and the Bains of the world. But entrepreneurship? Tell us.
Yes, I had a different reason. I wanted to take a break and backpack in Europe. And also keep
my goodness. Now I know why you left ISB. We wouldn't have given you the time to go backpacking. We make our students work 16 hours a day. Okay, I got it.
So I just wanted to take a break because, not a responsibility of running a startup, and also explore new things, but also wanted to be active.
Very good. Very good. Excellent.
I'll just have an ecosystem. And that's when I sort of started exploring things. Believe me, I've spent most time outside of class exploring things in London and elsewhere rather than being in class, just taking care of my attendance requirements. So
I hope your dean is not listening to this, okay?
I know Professor Mother is also, he's LBS. So yeah. So that's when I sort of started exploring different ideas. And that's when I got an opportunity to be a part of Creator Fund. So Creator Fund is a very innovative fund based out of the UK and Europe, and they invest in student-led startups, right? So, and the beauty of that model is that the team who basically scouts for the startups, evaluates them, and also takes the investment decision are actually students, right? So I got an opportunity to represent LBS at that fund as part of the investment committee, right? So when I sort of started looking at startups from Oxford, Cambridge, Edinburgh, and things like that, this idea sort of started ticking in my mind that why isn't something like this existing in India, right? Something which is dedicated for student entrepreneurs. There are a lot of early stage funds that exist in India, but it can be backing a second time founder who's starting afresh and things like that, right? But nothing which encourages students to sort of take that plunge, right? And this whole idea was actually started off in the US in 2020 by Dorm Room Fund, right?
Yes.
So there are obviously a couple of funds in the US like Contrary Capital, Prototype Capital, who support student entrepreneurs, right? And I got the exposure, and then I spoke to VCs in the Indian ecosystem, fellow entrepreneurs, and everybody is like, yes, there is a white space in there, but a campus fund in India will have to be built very differently from a typical venture capital fund, right? Because there are a lot of elements that will have to be brought together to build a fund like that, right? And I thought, this is something very interesting. I could connect myself to it because, I've been a student entrepreneur, and I was just thinking, if something like this existed when I sort of started, I think probably life would have been simpler, in the initial phase. So that's what gave me the kick. And believe me, Professor, we started this completely remotely, and Guru has been very supportive. I recruited my student team members, who are working with me to evaluate startups and everything. We've recruited 2 cohorts from ISB already, right? And it's been an amazing journey. In the last 1.5 years since our inception, we've evaluated 1,600 odd student startups from the depth and the breadth of the countries, and invested in 8 of them till now, right?
Okay.
You'll be amazed to see. And I'm also proud to say that 70% of the startups in our funnel come from not the so-called premium institutes. They come
This is
from
great.
they
This is
come
great.
from all possible universities, and that's what our intention is, right? Obviously we go to the IITs, BITS, ISBs and IIMs of the world, but we also have to go deeper into the ecosystem, right?
Which is great, which is truly democratizing what Hemang started to say. So let me intercept here and ask Rajesh this question. Rajesh, so Richa is saying that the key idea of the campus fund is that it is funded by the students, for the students, and even the evaluators are students. That sounds a little dicey to me. What would these young kids really know about evaluating? Don't you think they need experienced people like you? At least to evaluate it. I mean, these young people who are in their 20s, would they be able to do a good job?
Look, I think what is more important is access to largest pools of capital for more and more experimentations, right? The amount that we are talking about, I guess, in campus fund is small 1-2 crore kind of experimental money, maybe even smaller if I'm not thing. And I think we need to trust the young people to take right decision and let them take the idea to a stage where larger investments can be justified. I relate with what Richa is saying, and
so you're saying they can have a big funnel, right?
Yeah,
you can have a big funnel, and once it's ready, it can go to more experienced people.
Totally. I think, and even there, I think there are so many models of funding today. So there's a Tiger Capital model of funding. I will look at Excel's portfolio and see what is working, or I'll do my research and I'll go and hunt that startup down. There is a Sequoia Capital's funding where they're just funding each and every thesis on the planet. So all of these can coexist because there are so many ideas to fund today, I think.
Yeah, okay.
And no amount of capital is enough, especially at early stages. More experiments we do, more ideas will filter out, which can be taken to a larger canvas.
Okay. So Hemang, let me come back to you now. In fact, when you were conceptualizing the Atal Innovation Mission, you were even more aggressive in some sense of where the entrepreneurship can start. You thought that this can even start at schools. And that's a radical idea. So tell us how you thought about it. I'm telling Richa, hey, these are young people, 20 to 25, but you are saying, well, again, to underscore what Rajesh said, that the most disruptive ideas come from young people. And you are saying these young people may be 13 or 14-year-olds. So you took a bet there in terms of that this might work, and created this tinkering labs and the Atal Innovation Missions, which is at the university. So tell us how you were thinking about this.
So it's an interesting story and anecdote, Bhagwan. When I went to a friend's place, his, I think, 5-year-old daughter was playing with the iPhone and she could open the lock. So, now ideas have no age. So, and design thinking also has no age. And that is where we thought that why not start something at a very lower level? A similar idea, a similar concept was in the computer age when we used to go to, when we used to have computer lab in school, and we used to stand in a queue there for a 15-minute slot to paint something. NIIT had tried some similar idea in one of the slums in Mumbai, where they had just put a hole in the wall and put a computer. The idea was called hole in the wall, and they just left it there. And they wanted the kids to come and play. And to their surprise, within a week, everybody knew how to use a paint, how to use some of the say spreadsheets or some how to create a document. So those are some of the anecdotes that were in mind when we were thinking about the tinkering labs. And you will wonder what kind of ideas are coming out of those labs. Recently on Kaun Banega Crorepati, Amitabh Bachchan showed one of the labs in Chhattisgarh, and people were playing with drones. So see, we have to reimagine the future. Why do we want our kids, when they go to an IIT or MIT, to operate their first drone? Why not they operate their first drone in class 6? Yeah. When they go to IIT or MIT, they will start designing drone-based applications. And similarly, we have to reimagine our education also. Why do we want a student to spend 18 months or 14 months in a campus? Why can't we reimagine a system where they learn in the startups and that becomes their coursework? Because a startup entrepreneur, what they learn in first 6 months of their journey is much more than any of 4 credit course. That they can. So we have to start reimagining our both campuses and reimagining our entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship does not need to start after a master's degree or after a bachelor's degree or even after a technical degree. Entrepreneurship can start from home. And believe me, we have 50 lakh entrepreneurs in India. By definition, every Kirana store in this country is an entrepreneur. Yes. And there is no limit to their imagination. And there is no limit to what they can achieve and they can do given a right platform. So I think those are some of the interesting ideas, and the new education policy provides us a platform to think about them.
I just want to add to one point.
Yes, Rajesh.
So look, so I think this is a slightly, so entrepreneurship is not about ideation, right?
It's not only about ideation.
So let me put it this way. If ideation is God, if ideation is king, execution is God. So what we really need to teach in colleges and through this lab is the idea of tinkering, an idea of figuring out how to do it, execution. And even more broader than just entrepreneurship is this idea of creating entrepreneurial mindsets. And I think that's what we are trying to do at Plaksha. So we do know that a lot of people will not take to entrepreneurship just as yet, even after the colleges or when they finish. But can we imbue them in this whole notion of entrepreneurial mindset? Even if they go to the companies, they're entrepreneurial. And at some stage, they'll sort of become entrepreneurs. I think that is a larger objective for us at Plaksha than just creating some entrepreneurs and ideas.
So I think I resonate with that maybe even in our schools, maybe we should spend one day a week where people are just doing problem solving. We don't need to call it entrepreneurship. We need to call business and say, hey, look around yourself and find out what is it that's making you mad, that's you're not happy with, and just try and solve that problem. So coming to you, Rajesh, execute it, not just say, oh, this can be done or that can be done, but actually go ahead and solve it and around your community, your school, your home. And that is something that we haven't done, and maybe that's what needs to be inculcated. So Richard, tell me, in the MBA program itself, do we need to think differently now?
Yes.
Do we need to reform the MBA? As Rajesh is already saying, at Plaksha, his goal is to fire the people who are in placement so that everybody can be entrepreneur. We are beginning to think about that at ISP as well, that, how should we do that, Richa?
Sure. No, actually, before I get to that, one another important point that I'd like to, share with all of you is that it is very important that we start applauding the failures as well, right?
Very
Because
good. Yeah.
what happens is, I'm doing MBA from ISB. I have to get into a top, consulting firm, and that'll probably, increase my, stature in the society and things like that. My parents will be happy about it. But it's okay if somebody takes a plunge of being an entrepreneur, and it's okay, you tried at an idea, not every idea would work, but as a society, and it starts from schools, because parents have a lot of influence, right? So parents should also start sort of applauding failures, right? So
Yes.
that's an
Yes, indeed.
ecosystem that we all need to create. Otherwise, it holds on people with great potential to take that risk. More than the monetary risk, it is that, pressure in the mind, that we need to release and take off. And it not only is about educating students, it's also about educating their near and dear ones. So that ecosystem change is critical.
Parents.
Yes. And people.
And parents have a hard time.
Yes.
Indian parents have an even harder time.
Yeah.
If their kids fail in school in any way. It's like, don't come home and talk to me about it. But you're saying we need to applaud failure.
Yes.
I'm going to go and ask both Hemang and Rajesh, how do we do that? I mean, there's something very hard to do. You can't just totally say, oh, I'm going to reward failure.
Yeah.
You're saying we have to allow people to fail, but their goal should be that they want to succeed. And this is kind of very thin line there, that your goal is to succeed. Your goal is not to fail. How do we do that?
I think
Yeah, you can start, and then I'm going to go to Hemang and then Rajesh. What do you think, Richa? How do we start doing this?
Right. So, the thing is, at least as it is said, right? Somebody has tried their hand on something, it'll work, it'll not work, they'll iterate and things like that. It's also very important to be realistic and, get feedback, right? So, I think even from the very days that a child is studying in schools and you have these parent-teacher meetings, rather than saying, that the scores are less, it's about how it is that it can be improved. The interest of the child is, in so and so space. Otherwise, how it works in the Indian ecosystem, you have to be a doctor or an engineer, only then, things would work for you. Otherwise, it won't, right? So, certain things like this, especially have to start at the very initial stages in the schools and in the universities as well, right? If for example, especially in the MBA schools, right, like in the West, if there can be options created wherein students can work or can,
Yes.
take some projects in parallel to their studies and, fail, experiment, and, then decide, what they want to do, whether they want to become intrapreneurs by joining large companies, or they want to become entrepreneurs. So when we start inculcating all of this at every stage of a student's life, and by getting their near and dear friends and family involved, right, that's when it becomes a holistic thing. And to be very honest, Professor Chaudhary, this is not a job of a year, it's a job of decades. And it's just not a job of one institution, it's a job of the entire country, including the government. We have to gradually move towards that, right? And be very transparent about things, learn and move ahead. Only once you fail will you realize that, okay, this could be done, in a better way, or this didn't make sense. Be practical about it, but give an opportunity to understand and fail. You'll have great learnings. So we should start.
Exactly. The key here is learning.
Yeah.
So one of the things we have tried in colleges and education system, and Rajesh, you might be aware of that, is, we allow students to take classes, and then if they fail, they can sort of say, okay, I'm just going to convert it into a pass-fail or something like that. So you can take more risks. You can take those. At MIT, in their first year, they have no grades at all, right? Which is again an idea. Try something. Take a physics class, take a quantum physics class, even though you're a physician, and so on and so forth. So those are some of the things we can do. But you use the word government, and I think you are looking at Hemant. What can government do? Hemant, do you have an idea? What can government do to allow people to fail?
I think so. Before going into what can government do, I would like to slightly extend what Richa and Rajesh said. We not only need to make people problem solver. First, we need to make them a good problem finder, and that is what the crux of design thinking at the tinkering labs is. If we make our kids good problem finder and good problem definer, the first milestone is already achieved. They have already succeeded in doing that. Now it's a different matter if they succeed in implementing or solving that problem. That is first one. Second, I think what government can do is create more opportunities, more public good in terms of accelerators, incubators, tinkering labs. That is already there. If you look at the NEP, there is already opportunity for designing flexible curriculum with the universities and campuses so that it can provide more practical learning to students. So a lot can happen. A lot can be done on the funding side. Making more risk capital available at a very early stage, making more grants available at an early stage, and most important is making problems available. So far, people have to run after government to find even problems to solve. So how do we even make problems available to private sector and at early stage entrepreneurs that, hey, here is a problem in my water sector, here is a problem in my logistics sector, why don't you solve it? That itself can change the game. So the key is, how do we start early? How do we make design thinking at an early stage? And how do we make people good problem finder and good problem definer? That is what I think will give us more results in the long
run. So I'll tell you one other experiment I'm willing to try at ISB, and I've talked to many ISB alumni, which is the following, that we are going to tell some of our people who are going to placements that, hey, if you want to be an entrepreneur and step out of placement, instead of getting that job that's going to pay you 30, 35, 40 lakhs, we will actually pay you not 30 lakhs, but we'll pay you maybe 10 lakhs. But you go ahead and do it. You go ahead and be an entrepreneur for a year or two. We'll pay you to make sure that there is bread on the table so that your wife doesn't complain too much or your husband doesn't complain too much, and then try it out. And if it doesn't work, you can come back and be part of the placement 2 years from now. So making it easy to fail. And many of our ISB alumni have in fact suggested to us that they will create such scholarships. They'll create scholarships for students. So I don't know, Rajesh, have you had thoughts similar to those lines at Plaksha?
No, totally. I think this is a great idea. So I'll share 2-3 ideas and what we're trying to do. So one idea we have implemented, it's called Challenge Lab. It's a 10-week program. It's done in collaboration with Berkeley, where 2 of us and 2 professors from Berkeley together have do it for postgrad class, where we have TLP program. And in that, we have 10 teams. We make 10 teams because we have a class of 50, and they work on a startup of their own. And we take them from ideation, consumer research, to MVP, to hopefully some launches. So I think that's hugely useful because we actually make them do all of that within 3 months. So that's one idea. The second idea we have is we have a program called PEST, where we are not giving 10 lakhs, but we're giving 3 lakhs to some of those students who want to work on startup for the 6 months. And then after 6 months, we have a proposal to give them up to 50 lakhs of funding.
If they come up with that.
If they come up with, then they have to pitch, they have to compete for that. But first 6 months, we'll give them 3 lakhs. So similar to the idea of 10 lakhs that you have. And the third is, which is my experience from 100 startups, and this is what I've learned. Every startup that I funded, when it presented its business plan and idea, changed it within 6 months to 1 year of its existence. Everyone. So the key question for me is not whether this startup can scale this business or idea or not. Key question is, can he deal with that failure? And how is he going to deal with it? And they pivot, they change, some shut down. And that's when you're tested, right? That is the crux of entrepreneurship. And I don't think it can be taught unless the people have skin in the game, when they really experience the pain of a failure. So otherwise, failure is notional, right? It happens, I failed something. But when the skin in the game is there, and when they see that pain, when the thing they had to love, and I think Richa went through it. I have gone through it multiple times. And that sort of takes you to the next level of evolution as a being, right? And I don't know. I don't have an answer how to.
Yeah, we are all experimenting. We will try different
But what
things.
the point I like about Richa is that, can we create a supporting environment?
Yes,
Where,
the infrastructure, the ecosystem.
Where these failures are not looked down upon. I think it's changing in India. It's enormously different today than it was last decade, and I think it's becoming better and better.
I think we are going to take a few questions from the audience. So Guru, you are going to have those questions and read it out to them, and maybe I'll rephrase them if I need to. But please go ahead.
Sure. Thank you so much, Bhagwan, and thank you.
One thing that I wanted to add here, Guru, and
Richa,
just before we move on. And since you're experimenting, with this entrepreneurship break within ISB, like the West, especially in the MBA schools or, the postgrad schools, can we not disclose the grades to the potential recruiters? Because what happens is, in the fight to get day zero interviews, people are just, focusing on their scores, and then they are probably not getting that mind space to experiment with newer things while they are, in their B schools. I understand in undergrad like that, when they are doing BTech, BA, BSc, probably scores are important. But in the B schools, can we do that like it happens in the West? I mean, this is a stability.
We have thought about it many times, and this is the issue. I think there are those who would like grades not to be displayed, but there are those who are nerds who want their grades to be displayed because that's what they're good at, right? Mm-hmm. So I always tell these people who said, let not our grades be displayed. I said, how about if I ask you not to display the fact that you were actually the leader, you were the president of GSB? Would that be okay with you? And they said, no, I want to say that. So I think there has to be a trade-off. My answer is, I'll tell you what my answer is, and not everybody agrees with it, is to allow all students to say that of the first 16 classes you took in your first term, you decide which 8 grades you want to be disclosed and which 8 you don't want to be. So show your best, not the one. This will allow Rajesh's failure. I can take risky classes and fail, but I only get to show what I'm good at. Just as people who are GSB presidents get to show what they are best at. They are not going to say, oh, but I stood for election and I didn't win, right? So they don't show that. So it's a larger conversation, but I'll come back to it. So Guru, let's see what audience is saying and asking.
Sure. Thank you, Bhagwan. Thank you, everyone on the panel for your sort of wonderful thoughts. There's quite a few questions, but also a few opinions, I think, in the chat box. So one of the question is from Akshay, who says, I'm a student entrepreneur. I wanted to ask how we can overcome the gap in terms of industry connects that someone who's a working professional and then who wants to start up, has the benefit of, how can that gap be sort of bridged as a student entrepreneur? And then that's one question. I just want to sort of pose two questions so that you can, Bhagwan, you can choose to sort of, direct it. The other question is also about this. I think the issue of failure that you've all discussed, I think is sort of, gaining traction in terms of, comments and discussions. One of the things is about, teachers in classrooms actually sort of have a very important role, whether it's in higher education institutions or, in schools. So, but I don't think we're focusing or talking more about teachers. We have spoken, even on this panel, we've spoken about parents' mindset, but we all know that how our students,
Teachers,
have a lot of this thing. So I think these are two questions. The gap.
So very good. So let me take the first question and now let me address it to Rajesh. I think the question is, and you kind of referred to it, that experience may be important as well. So this question you're asking is that, look, I'm a student, I'm young, I have ideas, but there are people who have experience who can tell whether there's a market for it or not. How do you bridge that gap? And how do you create the right kind of mentorship, perhaps? Rajesh, your thoughts on that?
I think two, three ideas. So obviously, students need mentors. They need some guidance, and I think this is the job of the colleges to facilitate, right? The administration and infrastructure and the people who sort of need to encourage this, need to think more actively about it. And the second good thing is people Laksha is new, but if you look at IITs and ISBs, they have huge network, right?
Yeah.
Your alumni is everywhere. So those connects are the most useful connects I have found. And they're always willing to help students from their college. So tap onto that. That's my second advice. And the third is internship.
Oh, Rajesh, just to intercept, that's exactly what we are doing. In fact, we have this program with the Adult Tinkering Labs with AIM. We are connecting those young students with our alumni. We are calling them Adult Mentors at ISB.
Nice.
Exactly. So we have about 12,500 alumni all over the world. So we are making those connects. So thank you for pointing that. That's exactly what we're doing. Yeah, go ahead.
And the third idea is internship. So
yeah.
And it can be facilitated with our networks and relationships. And if they can do internships in those kind of organizations or startups, I think these are the three ways to address it, right? And the last thing is you're never fully going to get everything. You have to make that call. So you start when you're not ready. You were never ready. So you can always do research.
So that actually goes back to the second question, Guru, you had asked, which is about how to change the mindset of the teachers. How do you tell teachers that don't always be looking for a student who's going to be an A+ student? Get a student who is a C student and see if he or she actually has an idea that is different. Think differently. Any idea, Hemang and Richa, about how to get the teachers' mindset there?
No, I think the mindset question applies to both teachers and students. I always tell everybody that you always remain cog in the wheel. What is a cog? A curious, open, and grounded person. So if you are an entrepreneur, if you are a student, if you are worried about your idea, go and talk to 500 people. And definitely you will get your answer. Be open, be curious. Similarly, teachers also have to understand that they are not dealing with a degree now. They are dealing with a startup. As soon as a student comes in your class, it's already a startup. If you start treating them that way, I think it will go a long way in their journey itself as well.
Yeah. So one of the things I know some teachers do is, like, I know some great mathematicians have done this with their graduate students. Give them a problem that they could not solve themselves and let them see how they work. And I think this is one of the greatest pedagogical skill that we have rarely tried. Give students an impossible problem. And most of the time they would fail and let it be, accept it. But once in a while, you will find a magical solution that comes through. So, Richa, maybe that's what I'll do in my MBA exams. We are going to give them an impossible problem to solve and see what trials they did, how they tried for it. Okay. Guru, other questions?
Yeah. So there's another question. I think, if there were regulators of higher education in some sense would be an appropriate one. But, can we not give credits to students who try or want to try entrepreneurship while studying in a university, right?
Exactly.
A lot of conversation is about what we can do to support their placements, opting out of placements and things like that. But is this an idea that's feasible?
Yeah, I think it's an excellent idea. I'd like Hemang to comment on it, which is, I was saying we should have 4+1, 5 days of school, 4 days of regular this thing, 1 day off, this experimental stuff and you get credit for it. You don't just do it for Hemant. What do you think?
No, definitely. It's a fascinating idea. And I think why even 4 days and 1 day? Why not 4 days of entrepreneurship and 1 day of experience sharing? Anyways, when people come to your classroom, they don't come to read books. They come to network, interact, and learn from each other, right? That is the best way of learning. Today, you don't need a textbook. It's available on Coursera and edX, free of cost. So I think the question is not for the entrepreneurs. The question is for the universities and educational institutions like ISBs. How do you redefine your curriculum structure? How far do you go in the flexible curriculum structure that the NEP allows? And how imaginative you can be in designing your course? I think that's what the answer is.
Okay, so we'll take maybe a couple more questions, Guru. Is that right?
Sure. Yeah,
but before I take a couple of questions, I want to end with the last question, but I want to throw that out first to our panelists so that they can think about it. My question is going to be, if there is one change in the educational system you would like to see, what would that be? That's going to be the last question, but you don't have to answer it now. Let me go back to Guru.
Yeah, thank you, Bhagwan. I think I'll sort of combine two questions. One is, interestingly, there are 2-3 comments about the role of libraries in higher education institutions, and the comments and questions are, there's a lot of conversation around ideas, and libraries and spaces like libraries often, sort of help think about new things. Is there a connect between institutions that have great libraries and also therefore, they're seen as good places for entrepreneurs and startups to flourish? And the second is can you comment, anyone on the panel, about what should we do specific to rural entrepreneurship? Okay, very good. The first is libraries, and my answer to you, Guru, is that our younger generation is saying library. What is library? We've got internet. I mean, but maybe that's a more facetious remark, but I'll go back to my panel and see what do they think about libraries, or how can we reimagine the new library of the 21st century? Any one of you want to take that?
So just
Richa.
one thought here. Libraries could be those tinkering labs in the higher education
Wonderful.
institutes wherein students come together, experiment, ideate. They not only have resources in terms of journals and things like that, they also have, other resources that would need to probably try out a prototype or, things like that. Sort of a vibrant place for folks to come together, ideate, experiment, That's how you can probably reimagine, and that should become the focal of every university.
I have an idea, Guru. Can I throw an idea about a library?
Yes.
We need to create a library of all failed attempts, everything that did not work. I think the graveyard of failures is the biggest source of ideas. Things that did not work 10 years ago, 20 years ago, might be ready now. Things that did not work because they were not executed correctly could work with the right execution. So I always say, look at the things that did not work and see if you can. So I like to create a library of failed ideas, which doesn't happen because we all know what succeeded. But that's not much to do. If it succeeded, there's not much to do. So that's kind of my thought about the library. Your second question, Guru, I forgot. Was what?
Focus on rural entrepreneurship. What should
rural entrepreneurship. Okay. Hemant, do you want to take that?
No, yes, definitely. See, both the entrepreneurship and the education related to entrepreneurship has to go rural. India still lives in its rural areas. So we would like to see, and rural entrepreneurship is also more important because all the problems that you are going to solve are going to come from rural area. So that's where you have to go. I don't know how do you do it sitting in Hyderabad if you are able to send people for say 2 months for attachment somewhere. I think that exposure is required. We end up getting only exposure of top 10 cities, but exposure below in places like ISB would be the answer to that.
So I'll tell you, Hemant, what I'm going to try at ISB. There's a wealth of information, there's a wealth of videos and ideas, but you know what? They're all in English. I'm going to create regional version of how to do entrepreneurship in Hindi, in Marathi, in Telugu, and that's what I'm going to try.
Very important. Recently at Atal Innovation Mission, we announced the Vernacular Innovation Program, where innovation will be available in 22 regional languages through our incubator, Atal Incubator Network. And of course, it will be an open program, so many people can adopt it. So very important.
That doesn't solve it, but it's a step towards rural entrepreneurship.
I always tell that I imagine in Gujarati, think in Hindi, and then execute in English, because I know only 3 languages.
We are done with the audience questions.
We are
Bhagwan.
done with them. We have
Answer
only
yours.
a minute left. So each one of you, if there is one thing you could change, if Modi ji said, Hemang, you are the minister for education for one day, go ahead and change that. And same thing for Rajesh and Richa. Tell me what that would be.
I think I would be very practical here. I would like to see one thing change is more research universities.
More research universities.
More research universities. We need many more research universities, and for a place like ISB, I would go to the extent of saying a startup university. Why don't you have a startup university where we will only roll out startups from there, not MBAs and not graduates?
Okay, I'm on it. Okay, Rajesh.
Yeah, I think we should just end all exams.
You should?
End all exams.
End all exams. Okay, all right. Wonderful idea. And
I think they cause the biggest anxiety, stress in the world, and just stops all our learning.
And Richa, you get the last word.
Thank you for that. And actually, I was just about to say what Rajesh said, just get rid of scores, because uske bahut zyada connotations hote hain, from parents to teachers, from friends to colleagues, from the very early stage, how many score, what's your score, top percentile, least percentile. It's such a psychological trap. Just get rid of scores.
I would go a step further and say, even in your personal life, and that's what my wife Swati keeps telling me, is stop judging. Stop judging. And on that note, thank you to all of you for really thoughtful and freewheeling discussion. And thank you, Guru and Prashant and everybody, for organizing this and giving us this chance.